Members, when the business of this House suspended for the luncheon break, the Honourable Member for Southern Shores had reserved the floor. The Chair recognizes the Honourable Member for Southern Shores.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm always grateful to Almighty God and the good people of Southern Shores for the opportunity to stand in this place. I won't need that. For the opportunity to stand in this place and speak on their behalf. I want to begin by thanking the Association for the Free National Movement of Southern Shores, who, upon their recommendation, would have resulted in the Executive Committee and the Central Council of the Free National Movement ratifying me as the standard bearer. And so, Mr. Speaker, God willing.
Honourable Members, can you lift the microphones up off the table a bit, please?
God willing, whenever it happens, His will be done on earth and heaven, and here to be used as His vessel. Mr. Speaker, I want to join with my colleagues who would have expressed condolences to all who mourn, particularly those in the Southern Shores constituency. My heart goes out to them. It is my prayer that the memories of their loved ones will continue to be a blessing to them. I would wish, Mr. Speaker, to shift to happier moments, and there are a number of persons who recently celebrated birthdays that I would love to recognize with your indulgence, Mr. Speaker. There is Mistress Bullard, who has adopted me as a son. So, Mother Bullard, celebrated recently. Happy birthday to you. Norma Clark, another mother of mine, celebrated recently. I want to say happy birthday to you, Miss Norma. I want to say happy birthday to a good friend of mine all the way in Rollville, Exuma. It's Catherine McKinsey, who celebrated on last weekend. Happy birthday to you, Catherine. And then, Mr. Speaker, there is a beautiful young teenage 95-year-old Carmetta Rose, who celebrated this last weekend, 95 years. And if you see her, you will not believe it. She is still up and about. And as I commend her on her birthday, I also want to commend her grandson, Sean, who goes out of his way to make sure that Grammy is enjoying the best of her days. Mr. Speaker, on behalf of the original crew that used to hang out at Jeff's Place on our Waki, I want to say a special happy birthday to Manford Strong, aka Manny, who's celebrating today. Manny, if you're watching, happy birthday from the crew, and I look forward to us getting together pretty soon. Mr. Speaker, the bill before us today is a timely bill, Mr. Speaker. Timely in the sense that it speaks to a lot of the murmuring that has been going around, a lot of the questions that have been raised in recent times, a lot of the anxieties that may have been caused by people being told that there is this possibility, as my colleague would have said earlier, that they could sit home and get thousands of dollars because of resources that are available to us. And one of the previous speakers put it quite aptly. Yes, there are resources, but you won't enjoy that benefit by sitting back and waiting for it to come to you. I always reference the passage that speaks about the birds of the air and how they starve not, by paraphrasing. But Mr. Speaker, they starve not because they remain in the nest and Almighty God brings the food to them. They starve not because they're prepared to leave their nest and go out to scratch for the worms and find something to eat. Even the lilies, we talk about how beautiful they are. They starve not, Mr. Speaker, because they are prepared to send their roots deep down into the earth in search of that water to keep them refreshed and evergreen. Our natural resources, Mr. Speaker, is no different. They are there, but we have to go and find them. We have to collect them. We have to process them. We have to add value to them to get them to the point where they are worth millions that could then be enjoyed by the Bahamian people. That said, I want the record to show that I am in full support of every Bahamian enjoying every benefit from every resource that this beautiful country of ours has to offer. And so it takes me to the bill, Mr. Speaker. This bill is attempting to do just that. Just that, Mr. Speaker. The objectives of the bill. The objectives of this act is to establish a framework for the fair and equitable sharing of benefits arising from the utilization of generic resources and associated traditional knowledge, including by appropriate access to genetic resources, transfer of relevant technologies, taking into account all rights over those resources and to technologies, and by appropriate funding, thereby contributing to the conservation of biological diversity and the sustainable use of its components. This bill, Mr. Speaker, that you would hear from the side opposite that they would have worked on, of course, they worked on it, Mr. Speaker. Of course, they deliberated, Mr. Speaker. And then that's it. Like many other subjects that they discussed and deliberated on. You would hear the side opposite speak about, oh, these ideas were coming from an IDB report from 2014. Yes, Mr. Speaker. Yes, Mr. Speaker, from 2014. And what happened from 2014? 2014, they were there. 2015, they were there. If I was in the church, I would get a yes. 2016, they were there. Half of 2017, they were there, Mr. Speaker. Zero, nada, zilch. Shoulda, coulda, woulda. And so, Mr. Speaker, notwithstanding the fact that governments are continuous, notwithstanding the fact that the side opposite likes to recount certain historical data, there is never an appreciation for the fact that during the chronology of those events, there would have been a time when nothing happened. Nothing happened. And so now, Mr. Speaker, it's happening. It's happening. And so, if you're going to support a bill, support it on its merits. Support it on its merits. It's a good bill. Let's support it. There's no need to add the shoulda, woulda, coulda. There's no need to take us back into those dark pipelines where it appears many good ideas just met their demise. Mr. Speaker, this government that I'm pleased to be a part of, this minister-led government goes beyond the talk and is able to do the walk. And that is what this bill is doing, Mr. Speaker. We are walking our people through possibilities. We are walking our people through the potential. They should have been here. Again, shoulda, woulda, coulda. They're being paid to be here. They should have been here. But I'm sure that there are enough persons here to tell them what Southern Shores had to say. Mr. Speaker, back to the interpretations, the definitions, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, everyone who spoke, Mr. Speaker, even the side opposite, have told the Bahamian people that they want the Bahamian people to benefit from and share in these resources. But let's see what the definition says about it. There's something here that says benefit sharing. Means sharing in a fair and equitable manner by the user of the monetary and non-monetary benefits as contemplated under Part 3 that accrue to or from the utilization of the biological and genetic resource and associated traditional knowledge with the rights holder. With the rights holder. And that caused me to be curious with the rights holder. Who is this rights holder, Mr. Speaker? Who is this rights holder? And I stayed right in the definition because I wanted to make sure that there was nothing misleading, that we weren't talking about sharing with some people who don't deserve or who haven't earned or who are not entitled. And so I went to rights holder, which is defined here with regards to biological and genetic resources and associated traditional knowledge means a person, a person or community who holds associated traditional knowledge and who has rights with respect to such biological and genetic resources and associated traditional knowledge in terms of this act, or B, the government of the Bahamas. Mr. Speaker, that says it all. It says that this act is ensuring that whatever belongs to the Bahamian people will be shared with the Bahamian people equitably. And you see, Mr. Speaker, that is the mandate of the Bahamian people to its government, to ensure on their behalf, to ensure for them that whatever belongs to them is kept and preserved for them. This is not haphazard by this government, Mrs. Speaker. While others suggested that under these emergency orders, democracy was not alive, this, Mr. Speaker, will be the 44th piece of legislation passed in this House under the emergency orders. This, Mr. Speaker, will add to the number of legislation that is continuing to ensure that that which belongs to the Bahamian people will continue to be reserved for the Bahamian people. Mr. Speaker, I listened to the side opposite, who continue to highlight and remind us of the times that we find ourselves in. That the times that we find ourselves in the Bahamas, and the times that we find ourselves in globally. Mr. Speaker, there is no playbook for these times, Mr. Speaker. I note that the side opposite today was careful not to reference any particular country. They didn't call any country's name, because history would have shown that every time they call a country's name as a reference point whom we should follow in these hard times, they had to come back and say, well, no, I don't mean them now. Let's try another country. So this morning we didn't hear Barbados. We didn't hear the United Kingdom. We didn't hear the United States. All we heard was, we could do better. And Mr. Speaker, we agree that it is possible to do better. That is why we continue to review our position. That is why we continue to reassess our position, Mr. Speaker, because we on this side are not prepared to rest on our laurels, Mr. Speaker. We on this side are students of continued improvement. We on this side continue the search of ways to do things better. And when we can't find a way to do it better, Mr. Speaker, we look for a way to do it faster. Mr. Speaker, we were admonished just recently that it is not perfection that we are being measured by, but progress. This, Mr. Speaker, is a progressive bill for and on behalf of the people of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Mr. Speaker, if I am allowed, I would like to take my seat, borrowing the words of my good neighbor, just west of Southern Shores, who never closes without saying, God bless the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, where the wealth will become more common. Mr. Speaker, Southern Shores supports this bill because we're satisfied that this bill moves us closer to making the wealth more common. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member. As many? The chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Golden Isles.
Yes. Mr. Speaker, first, give honor to Almighty God who has made it possible for all of us to be here. Thankful and grateful to the good people of Golden Isles who has made it possible for me to be here. Mr. Speaker, this legislation, as stated, this piece of legislation has our support, and it's a timely piece of legislation. I shall not speak too much to it other than to pretty much support it and follow up on a lot of what has been said, not to repeat a lot of what has been said. But Mr. Speaker, we live in an archipelago. We live in an island nation, and the member for the Exumas talked of us having, I think, being what 95% of our country comprises of the ocean. In comparison, it is said that if we were to compile all of our islands together, comparatively, it would be about the size of the Caribbean nation of Jamaica. And so, with approximately 95,000, in excess of 95,000 square miles of ocean or marine resources, it is fitting this legislation is long overdue. Mr. Speaker, what concerns me, what has bothered me for quite some time, is for us being an archipelagic nation, that so few of the careers, so few of the professions, so few of the career paths reflected that in terms of producing oceanographers, producing even mechanics that specialize in welding underwater, producing marine biologists, even as many captains of vessels to navigate our waters. We have a number of them, but in comparison to our population, to the amount of captains we should have, we do not have. And so certainly we need to give this a much more focused attention. Mr. Speaker, as it relates to our natural resources in this area, it's not been talked of a lot. When we talk of natural resources, the ones we hear about is usually oil, aragonite, sand, and etc. Those are the more popular ones. What concerns me, and I touched on it last week, is the area of protectionism. When we dealt with the amendment to the Fisheries Act, we had a good measure of protectionism for Bahamians and solidified it that it is for Bahamians. But this as a natural resource, how feasible it would have been out of like the same type of measure taken to see that it's reserved for Bahamians. Unfortunately, that's not the case. It bothers me, Mr. Speaker, to be driving throughout the town, and there are some businesses that I would expect that should have been reserved, or a greater level of protectionism should have been put in place to reserve those businesses for Bahamians. And one such of those businesses is a lot of the Bahamian tire shops are almost out of business. And they're being put out of business by non-Bahamian tire shop owners. And so that concerns me. Also, Mr. Speaker, as it relates to non-Bahamians owning businesses in the Bahamas, what concerns me is that in terms of the employment, some of them, I know for a fact, do not hire Bahamians. They do not hire Bahamians. I repeat, there are some businesses that are owned by non-Bahamians who benefit from the patronage of Bahamians, but they do not hire Bahamians. And it bothers me. How can you have a business in the Bahamas? You benefit from Bahamians spending money doing business with you, but you seemingly have a policy to not hire Bahamians. It bothers me. And again, a level of protectionism that I feel should have extended to this area of the blue economy didn't occur. In the blue economy, as the member for Marcus City alluded to, in terms of fisheries and tourism and mining and energy. You talk about the environment and technology and the different areas of the blue economy. I think in the United Nations, under the Sustainable Development Goal 14, referred to it as life below water, as one of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals established in 2015 to conserve and to sustainably use the oceans, the seas, and the marine resources for sustainable development. They talked about threats like one, climate change. And of course, there are a grouping of persons who do not believe in climate change, and there's a grouping that do believe, obviously they do. Secondly, the threats of the marshlands or wetlands development. And I think that's an area that needs to be given a greater attention to, because there were a number of areas in New Providence that were once wetlands, and they have been developed. And the only time you would know they were wetlands, well, if you lived in New Providence long enough, you would know, or in the rainy season, sometimes you'll wonder if this was once a wetland. So obviously we did not give it in the past a focused attention that we should have. And I'm hoping that as a result of legislation like this, that we certainly would not make or repeat those mistakes. And then talked about another threat was overfishing. Okay, they threaten to degrade our resources, and certainly in the Bahamas, that is a concern for some areas, and that's a concern from some groupings. One of the things that some of the fishermen have said to me, that we focused a lot on the persons who poach our waters from down south, but they said they felt most of that type of fishing came from our neighbors to the north. That's another story, of course. Mr. Speaker said that some 75% that the ocean covers, about 75% or 3/4 of the Earth's surface, and represents some 99% of the living space on the planet by volume. Of course, in the Bahamas, it's 95%. So we know how important that is. The ocean contains, it is said, almost 200,000 identified species, but they say in actuality, it may be about 1 million. Approximately 40% of the ocean is heavily affected by pollution. And as it relates to us and our ocean, I've heard stories we've known of cruise ships, a particular cruise ship line that has been penalized for polluting our waters, for dumping in our waters. I've heard stories of fishes, persons who caught fish and had plastics in them. And so obviously it's a challenge. And there are some persons who felt that the penalty afforded the cruise lines certainly should have been a lot more hefty, but we know it is an issue. Also, depleted fisheries, yes, less of the coastal habitats and other human activities. It is said that the ocean observed approximately 30% of carbon dioxide. Now, early in human biology, they taught us that as human beings, we exhale carbon dioxide and we inhale oxygen. So it said that 30% of carbon dioxide produced by humans, buffering the impacts of global warming. And so we see some of the challenges. It said that some 3 billion, more than 3 billion people depend on the marine and coastal biodiversity for their livelihood. Growing up, certainly, and this is changing, and I know the minister, the member for Marco City, has been doing his best to change this image. Growing up, whenever you heard of what persons strive to be, you would never hear fishermen. But mind you, fishermen made more money than a lot of other professions that you would hear. Persons are just beginning to realize that this can be a profession, this can be an area they can get into and can make a good living from. And I think that's one of the things pointed out in the amendment of the Fisheries Act. And that's something that we need to encourage our people, our young men in particular, to venture into more. The challenge I have, the concerns I have, again, is in terms of and Senator Bill alluded to it earlier, how do we track this properly? In terms of legislation, we have no shortage of legislation. In terms of regulation, in terms of enforcement, that has always been a challenge for us. How do we regulate? How do we enforce? How do we ensure that whatever the Bahamian people are to derive from this, we get it? How do we ensure? And again, from the natural resources perspective and that of the sovereign wealth fund, how do we ensure that whatever is derived from these natural resources, it goes to where it's supposed to go, the sovereign wealth fund or wherever it's supposed to go? How do we know? How do we regulate? How do we enforce this? It is said, Mr. Speaker, some $3 trillion, the market value of marine and coastal resources and industries is estimated at some $3 trillion per year, about 5% of the global GDP. And so, Mr. Speaker, again, this legislation is timely. I commend for this legislation. But, Mr. Speaker, my concern for the Bahamian people, for the average Bahamian, how will the average Bahamian benefit from this? Whatever, how is it trickle down? I know we talk a lot about natural resources and how much you can get from it, how much the average citizen can get per month, and how do you calculate it? Is this foolishness? Is this, how can you legitimize this? And there's this debate going back and forth, and particularly during the pandemic, particularly when the misery index is at an all-time high, particularly when persons are losing their homes, when persons are unable to meet their mortgage payment, their rent payment, and particularly when, even as we speak, persons' electrical bills, electricity are being terminated. And so persons, they want to hear about how they can get some money. And it's almost as if making it seem as you can get something for nothing. And you never want to encourage that mentality and that mindset. But when persons are in desperation, when persons have legitimate needs, naturally, they are more vulnerable to believe whatever they hear. All they want is to have their needs met. And so it is of critical importance that we begin to have this dialogue with our people to demonstrate if it can happen, how it can happen. In terms of natural resources, I always say the process is first to identify. Let's identify what are our natural resources. What are they? And then when we identify, let's quantify this. How much do we have? Where are they? Where are they located? Approximately how much? What's the estimated amount? And then let's monetize this. What's the value of it? What's the estimated value? How much can we get out of this? And then we can have all the natural resources in the world, but if nobody wants to buy it, then what happens? And so we need to take a closer look at this. And so that, because my concern my concern is that the average Bahamian is able to benefit from our natural resources, in particularly during these difficult and challenging times. It was said in the early stages of the pandemic that the new norms, among the new norms, two would stand out. One, unemployment, and the other, poverty. Of course, unemployment and poverty are twins. If you have unemployment, chances are you will have poverty. And so, in the midst of this, how can the Bahamian people, how can the average Bahamian throughout the Commonwealth, from Grand Bahama to Inagua, how can they benefit from our natural resources? Again, I should like to commend the government for this piece of legislation, but in the midst of this, we need to have the conversation in terms of, it's one thing to put the legislation in place. It's one thing to say how this will benefit our people. It's another thing yet to make certain that it does benefit our people. And so, Mr. Speaker, having said that, I thank you for this time. That's my contribution to this debate. And I am hopeful. I am I'm an optimistic person. And so I look forward to sometime, and it's another thing with it in terms of putting time frames together on things. Not just to talk about it and say it will, but to put time frames about it. When do you think, based on research and calculations, when do you think, and how and when will can Bahamians expect to benefit from this? And so this is a step in the right direction. And it's all about empowering, it's all about helping to advance our nation. And it's about us. Certainly, for me, the concern in this legislation is not for me personally. And my time here in the House is not about me personally. It's about laying a foundation. It's about planting seeds for generations behind me and generations yet unborn. There were some Bahamians ahead of me, Mr. Speaker, who fought and who laid a groundwork and made it possible for life to be better for a number of us. And so now we must do likewise to make certain that we lay the groundwork, to make certain that life, that the potential for a better life is left in place for those who will one day succeed us. So having said that, thanks again. Golden Isles supports this legislation. And Mr. Speaker, as always, as usual, the Almighty God, Yahweh Elohim, continue to bless the Commonwealth of the Bahamas and to make the wealth more common. Mr. Speaker, you almost had me thinking I was in church here. Good backup, Mr. Speaker. Long live the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Golden Isles rest.
Thank you, Honorable Member. As many, the Chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Golden Gates.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Speaker, thank you very much. Mr. Speaker, I rise on behalf of the good and resilient people of Golden Gates, and it's an honor and privilege to represent them in this honorable House. Mr. Speaker, I shan't be long. I know, right? Marco City, I heard you. Or was that Son John? Mr. Speaker, this has been a wonderful debate, and I just want to add my voice to it because clearly the side opposite is in agreement with the bill, and so I just want to add my voice. Mr. Speaker, as the House is aware, I serve as the chairman of the House Select Committee on Natural Resources, and along with the other members, including the member for South Andros, Central Andros and Mangrove Key, the honorable member for Centerville, the honorable member for Golden Isles, the honorable member for Marathon, the honorable member for Fox Hill, and the honorable member for St. Barnabas. All of us form the Select Committee on Natural Resources, and I must say the committee is doing a very good job thus far, and we are moving forward on the agenda and the instructions given to us by this honorable House through the terms of reference. And Mr. Speaker, this bill is about natural resources. That's really what this bill is about. And there's been a lot said about what we are not doing in natural resources, what we ought to be doing. Well, this bill does a lot of what is said that we ought to be doing. There's no question this bill is doing the things. This bill provides for the structure and the regime so that the government can do the things we're all talking about, which is finding a way to earn revenue from our natural resources in a sustainable way. And that is what this bill provides. There's absolutely no question about it. We heard earlier today about sea whip and other species in the sea. And some of these, the sea whip, as we've been told, has been used as a patent. And we understand there are many others. So groups, individuals have been coming to our country for years, doing research in our country, perhaps even unbeknownst to us till sometime later, and using the results of the research to make money. And meanwhile, there has not been any regime or any structure in place to ensure that the Bahamian people also benefit. And that is what this bill does. It puts a regime and a structure in place where persons who so desire in the future to come to our country and conduct research, they will have to follow this regime we're putting in place. Otherwise, as the bill provides, there are penalties. There are penalties in this bill. So if they do not do that, they will be exposing themselves to liability for the penalty. And so this government is taking this very, very seriously, and it's a step forward. It's a major step forward in the right direction. And indeed, the honorable member for Marco City called it groundbreaking. And it's quite true. This is groundbreaking. We are doing something here that has not been done before in this country. First time ever. That is very progressive minister administration. First time ever. And while I'm on that, Mr. Speaker, we too, an honorable minister for the environment, the honorable member for Marathon, indicated that this is the 10th bill. Soon we hope to be act, to be the 10th act passed by this parliament having to deal with environment, with our environment. This government has taken the environment very seriously. And that's clearly indicated. The record will show that. There's no doubt. It is not in dispute. It is clear. This Free National Movement government, led by the Honorable Hubert Minnis, has clearly and undoubtedly made the environment a prominent issue and a prominent concern and something it is dealt with. We have 10 bills, soon to be 9 acts that have been passed, soon to be a 10th act, God willing, and it speaks largely. Oftentimes we hear we are not sufficiently concerned about the environment. That's what we hear. We're not concerned about the environment. We're not doing enough about the environment. Well, we've been doing it. This government has been doing the environment work. Has been putting down the entire foundation for the environment going forward. And this is what the minister spoke about this morning. An entire foundation has been placed. There was never a ministry for the environment. We did that. There was never a ministry of the environment in the Bahamas. That bill came to this parliament and that was passed. That was done by this government. A ministry of the environment. And many others. And so, as we said, there's a permitting process. You have to obtain a permit. You cannot any longer in the Bahamas just show up and decide you're going to start doing some research on some fish in the ocean, or some microbes, or some biodiversity. You just can't show up and just say, that's what you're going to do, because you determine that's good for you, for the research that you want to do, for whatever purpose. You now have to subject yourself, or anyone so desiring to do that, have to subject themselves to a permitting process. And as part of that, the Bahamas government and the Bahamian people will benefit financially in a way that we never have. Never. For the first time. And this is the concern that everyone has about natural resources. Ensuring that the Bahamian people, all of us, benefit from the natural resources. Mr. Speaker, not only does this bill provide the permitting process, but the bill also provides the kind of structure that includes specifically the Department of Environmental Planning and Protection. It includes an access to benefit sharing committee. Access to benefit sharing. There's a committee established under this act to ensure benefit sharing with the Bahamian people. Imagine that. This act creates a committee to ensure that the Bahamian people get a benefit. That's a financial benefit. That's what we're talking about here. There's a committee established under this act to do that. Mr. Speaker, there's absolutely no question about it that this piece of legislation is groundbreaking. It really sets, and the minister said this morning as well. He actually said this. He said, this is one of the first in the region. And this is an example to the region. That's how groundbreaking this is. And we ought not make light of that. We ought to really appreciate it in its full context. This is groundbreaking here today. Way out front. So much so that the minister said that, in his view, this was an example for other countries in the region. And not only is there the committee, as I mentioned a moment ago, there's also the Benefit Sharing Trust Fund. Mr. Speaker, there's also a trust fund. So we have different levels in this bill. And it speaks to the serious consideration that is given to putting a serious structure in place. And that's one thing we often say. Where's the structure? Where's the regulation? Where's the enforcement? We pass these bills, and where's the meat? Where is it? It's just a bill you pass? No, this bill has the structure in it. And if I should say so, agreeing with the minister this morning in his comments, it's a very sound, reliable, dependable structure. It's one that the Bahamian people can feel confident about and be sure that it would deliver as it promises. Mr. Speaker, with that, we'll engage support the bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. As many? Chair recognizes the honorable member for Marco City.
Copy.
Okay.
Not at all.
The chair recognizes the member for Foxhill.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy. Mr. Deputy, I rise on behalf of the wonderful and also resilient people of the great constituency of Foxhill, just to say a few words on this bill. Mr. Speaker, a lot has been said about the biological research portion of the bill. I wanted to pay a little bit of attention to the traditional knowledge part of the bill. So much of what is traditional in our country gets overlooked because we're so caught up in what is needed internationally. I think this bill provides an opportunity to take our local and traditional knowledge to a place where it can be monetized in a major way. Mr. Speaker, some weeks ago, I was quite saddened that, and people might think it's nothing, that a very mature dilly tree that bore year round had been cut down. If we're talking about our natural resources, we talk about the flora and the fauna being part of those natural resources. We are talking about eating healthy, about doing things that are good for our bodies. Mr. Speaker, we have almond trees throughout New Providence and the Family Islands. Yet, as Bahamians, we spend an inordinate amount of money buying almonds from grocery stores. We have people who are interested in crown land, and if we are going to develop with a plan, then that plan must include our traditional knowledge and our traditional flora and fauna. Mr. Speaker, I see Bahamas that has very many islands, and those islands all have something that is unique. So why can we not, in speaking about natural resources, have acres and acres of land or even islands that are dedicated to some of those traditional trees? Why can't Andros or Nagua or whatever island is best suited have thousands of almond trees, thousands of dilly trees, thousands of tamarind trees, because we're cutting them down in New Providence because we're looking for living space. And we're in here debating about our natural resources while outside we're cutting them down. So this is something to think about when we talk about natural resources, not just what comes out of the ocean floor, but what comes out of the ground. So I would like to see some attention, and I'm sure I heard the minister said that he has another piece of legislation coming that will probably address that. I might have said in here, I think it might have been last week, I had taken ill and I was home recovering, and some of my friends brought me this fruit basket, and in the fruit basket was a nice packet of tamarinds from Southeast Asia. That we go to the food store and buy, but we're cutting our trees down. So here's an opportunity, if we're on the natural resources bandwagon, that it isn't all in the sea. There's a lot in the sea, but there's a lot that we can do with the land as well. I also wanted to touch just briefly on where does the revenue go? That question has been asked in here. What happens to the fund? How do we know where it goes? Well, in its wisdom, the House appointed a select committee to investigate our natural resources. And as part of that, the Sovereign Wealth Fund is included. I am the chairman of that subcommittee, and we met today. We had our first meeting today. And so you have a bill that becomes an act, And then you say, how do we ensure that the funds go where they need to go, that the funds are used as they should be used? This is part of what this select committee is now investigating and doing work on. So, Mr. Speaker, I didn't want to say much, but I did want to say those things, that this work happens in the House, and what's happening in the House, the select committee puts clothes on it. It brings it to the people. It brings the people into it as part of it. When we're saying, where do Bahamians stand in this? As the select committee, we go to the Bahamians. We go to where they are. We go into their space so that they are a part of what becomes their livelihood. Mr. Speaker, I've looked at some countries where they have sovereign wealth funds, and the sovereign wealth funds are predicated on what the country needs. And so with this country, we must know where we're going. So a national plan that tells us where we're going will, in that way, dictate where your sovereign wealth funds set. So, Mr. Speaker, I want to congratulate the Minister for the Environment. I think it's a timely bill. I think he's done a yeoman's work, and on behalf of the Bahamian people. In the midst of all of this is the benefit to the Bahamian people. With that, Foxwell says, well done. Thank you, Mr. Deputy.
Thank you, member for Foxhill. That's many. Chair recognizes the member for Martha City.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Chair. Deputy Speaker. Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker. The Golden Gates brief in this regard. Mr. Speaker, it's been an honor to support the tremendous work of the Ministry of the Environment and the hardworking team there and all of the stakeholders who've made a contribution to bringing us this far. As you would be aware, Mr. Deputy Speaker, the NGO community in the Bahamas, the Nature Conservancy, BRIEF, the National Trust, all of the various environmental groups have been stellar partners with the government of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, successive administrations, in terms of providing technical expertise and resources. And we celebrate them as well. And then, of course, our fishers and those persons engaged in the pleasure cruise industry, those that are in the transportation business, all of them are important stakeholders because each of the piece of legislation that's brought here relative to the environment, relative to marine, the Department of Marine Resources, benefit from their input. We are, Mr. Speaker, finalizing the marine protected areas. The Ministry with responsibility for the environment and marine resources working collaboratively with our stakeholders to finalize the listing of the 43 marine protected areas. And we have hit our 20% mark, which we promised. We do have a few of the marine protected areas where there were some concerns expressed by fishers that may bring us just below the 20% mark. However, we believe over the course of the next 21 days, as we complete our consultation, we would exceed the 20% based on the input that they give us to the proposed list. And so I want to say thanks to all the stakeholders. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Deputy Speaker, one of the matters raised during the course of this discussion was the issue of illegal, unregulated, and unreported fishing. And to answer the concern that was raised by the member from Golden Isles, I wish to assure him and through you, Mr. Deputy Speaker, the public, that while the enforcement arm of government, whether it is the Royal Bahamas Defense Force, the police force, the fisheries officers, while we have focused significantly on poaching in the southern Bahamas, we have been equally vigilant and diligent in policing the northern Bahamas. And there have been a number of interdictions involving our neighbors to the north. We have benefited from a very close relationship with the U.S. Embassy, who have worked tirelessly with us. In addition, they have brought to the table, and we continue to work with them throughout the course of the year, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA. And you would see in Florida, in particular, some draconian fines and sentences relative to the violation of not just their waters. They've also sought to protect the neighbors to the south, the Bahamas. And so that partnership is paying dividends. In fact, we have reduced the bag limit for persons in pleasure crafts coming to the Bahamas. And as a result, they can no longer use the loophole that each person has a bag limit on the vessel, because the vessel could have 40 persons, but then we will be charging the bag limit to the vessel itself. And we've removed things like count from that bag limit as well. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the second question that was asked, and I thought it's a very important question, and it was raised by multiple speakers, was how does the ordinary Bahamian benefit? And so just a very, very quick short list. One is using Elizabeth or the CWIP as an example. One of the decisions that we made was to simply permit more groups to engage in the harvesting of Elizabeth. Prior to the last 2 years, one company had the ability to harvest. With the appropriate education, we believe more Bahamian companies should have an opportunity to harvest in a sustainable way the CWIP, which can then be utilized for further refinement because of the value of what it produces. That's one example. Secondly, we believe that there's a tremendous opportunity in the processing, for example, of conch shells and other shells in the Bahamas once they are authorized by the relevant authorities. And so we have an active study going on now to look at a multiplicity of ways that we can benefit from a resource that we have prior to now been contented to just ship to other persons, as if those other countries have a monopoly on brilliant ideas on how to create value-added products. Thirdly, there is a value to bush medicine, and the reality is that you can buy tea made out of a variety of things that traditionally we have used in the Bahamas, and increasingly now, Bahamians themselves are creating a variety of tea bags for a variety of ailments that affect Bahamians, Bahamians in general, and of course, men in particular. And so we have a very creative population, and so what you are seeing is our natural resources being used for the benefit of our population. How can the ordinary Bahamian benefit? Well, a number of Bahamian species, flora and fauna, are for medicinal purposes. A number of Bahamians are conducting research. In fact, some of the foremost Bahamians, some of the foremost researchers known globally relative to certain species are in fact Bahamian. Young, Ms. Sherman, the number one really, I think, expert globally on the Nassau group is a young, talented, gifted Bahamian whose advice has guided the adjustments we've made in terms of the regulations governing the Nassau grouper. And then, of course, we're saying there's a marvelous opportunity in terms of research. And so we encourage Bahamians to get into different areas of our research. There's an economic opportunity awaiting you. Also, we are attracting persons to the Bahamas and attracting Bahamians overseas and Bahamians locally to engage in writing for research grants, and a tremendous amount of resources continue to flow into the Bahamas. In fact, the ministry itself benefits from the various NGOs who attract money internationally from agencies that would rather not give funds to, let's say, the Ministry of the Environment or Ministry of Agriculture, but we benefit through our partnership.
1 second. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. How does the ordinary Bahamian benefit? We have several research stations that are already set up in the Bahamas, San Salvador, Eleuthera, a number of projects going on, including in Andros, etc. So there are economic opportunities in the pursuit of knowledge that has a beneficial value. Then also we just heard from the member from Foxhill talk about the importance of our folkways, the way in which we execute certain functions, like, for example, harvesting the cascarilla, extracting the oil from the cascarilla. All of these are methods that have a ecotourism, an agri-tourism benefit. And so monetizing things that we have taken for granted is an additional way for the ordinary Bahamian to earn a living. And so, Mr. Speaker, we have to be careful not to dumb down the information, presuming it's too complex for what I believe is a very intelligent public. And this is precisely why we have sought in this debate to discourage intellectual dishonesty by some who wish to pursue power by simply convincing people that they are the only friends of the Bahamian public interested in their welfare. They do not have a monopoly on love for this country or an understanding of what is required to develop this country. All of us have a shared responsibility, and I believe a shared love for our people and for the development of the Bahamas and its natural resources. Mr. Speaker, we agree with the criticisms that would level on the recommendation that we strengthen the enforcement apparatus. And so as we speak, there are meetings that are ongoing between all of the law enforcement agencies around the issue of enforcement of the marine protected areas, of our territorial waters in general, because truly the Bahamas is, rather than being a small island state, it is a big ocean state country. And so we are working on the enforcement issue, and in the new budget cycle, we'll be petitioning the government to make additional resources available to the law enforcement regime. And then, Mr. Speaker, the Bahamas is providing an international service whenever we go about the business of protecting our environment, both terrestrial as well as marine. Reason being that we are the estuary, we are the incubator for a number of important species that migrate throughout the region. We also, in our deep waters, we are also a part of a broad network of waterways where migratory species pass through. And so what we do in our oceans, what we do in our tributaries, what we do in our mangroves affect the marine health and a variety of species that move throughout the Caribbean and Latin America, and has an impact all the way up to Canada. And so we are providing a national service when we keep our oceans clean, when we put in place best practices in legislation, policies, and programs. To anchor this point, Mr. Speaker, our ability to attract international resources in part can be attached when we can make the argument to the international community because we function as a sink for carbon sequestration. That is to pull those harmful elements out of the air in order to reduce global warming, to slow and then to seek to reverse climate change. We can make a case that we are doing more than our share to one, reduce the carbon footprint, to help mitigate the damage done by other countries who are not paying their fair share in protecting the global environment, Mr. Speaker. And then finally, in order for us, Mr. Speaker, to have an impact not just on our livelihoods and to ensure wealth creation for Bahamian, we need resources to do what I mentioned at the beginning of my presentation, and that is to engage in a comprehensive plan to explode the blue economy. So that Ministry of Transport, Ministry with responsibility for the environment, Ministry of Tourism, Ministry with responsibility for marine resources work collaboratively to engage in spatial planning, to determine what the strategic plan is, how all of these competing sectors must coexist in order to benefit the Bahamas and by extension, the region. If this is to succeed, we need resources. And this government is committed to public-private partnerships, to finding the requisite resources to explode opportunities, first and foremost for Bahamians, and then by extension, others who wish to cast their lot with us. And so, Mr. Speaker, I wish once again to applaud the Minister, Minister Ferreira and his dynamic team, all the stakeholders who are out there who've made a contribution. Because when we come to this place with legislation, we come standing on the shoulders of everybody who have contributed, not just in this dispensation, but before, and we are grateful. And please keep in mind, when we do this for the benefit of the Bahamian people who we love and who we have the good fortune to serve. God bless you, and we rest, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable members, it has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read for a second time and committed. A bill for an act to provide for the protection and sustainable use of biological resources and traditional knowledge. As many members that are in favor will remain seated, those who oppose will stand. Order that the bill be read for a second time and committed.
A bill for an act to provide for the protection and the sustainable use of biological resources and traditional knowledge.
Further second reading of bills. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Southern Shores.
Mr. Speaker, there are no further second readings. I now move, Mr. Speaker, that the House resolves itself into a committee with the Deputy Speaker as the chair.
There a seconder? Honorable members, it has been moved that the House now dissolve itself into a committee of the whole with the chairman of the committee of the whole House and Deputy Speaker in the chair. As many members that are in favor will remain seated, those who oppose will stand. The House will now dissolve itself into a committee of the whole House with the chairman of the committee of the whole House and the Deputy Speaker in the chair.
Committee of the Whole.
Mr.
Chair
Chairman,
recognizes the member for Southern Shores.
Mr. Chairman, we're dealing with the Biological Resources and Traditional Knowledge Bill 2021. I now move that the long title of the bill be agreed.
Do I have a seconder? Second. It's being moved and seconded that the long title of the bill be agreed. As many members that are in favor remain seated. Those opposing will rise. The long title of the bill is agreed.
Mr. Chair, I move that the short title and commencement be agreed.
It's being moved and seconded that the short title and commencement of the bill be agreed. As many members that are in favor remain seated. Those opposing will rise. The short title and commencement of the bill is agreed.
Mr. Chair, I move that clauses 2 through 45 be agreed.
Chair recognizes the member for Exumas on Ragged Island.
Speaker, I move an amendment to clause 6L. I move that the word voluntary in clause 6L be deleted.
Clause
6L.
Page 11. Suggest that it's optional.
What's the reason for this?
It suggests that it's optional or voluntary. Speaker, I noted in my presentation that the word voluntary suggests that compliance with the code of conduct is optional. And I'm certain that that is not what was intended.
You could have made that mistake. Even if they got the word, but yes, the the jump.
Speak to it.
I have one more. No, I've done it already.
Sorry?
It's being moved and seconded that the section 6, subsection L, be amended as proposed, as read. As many members are in favor of the amendment.
It's not optional.
No.
You don't want it to be
You're
optional.
not going to speak on it?
I did already.
Exhumas, if you wish to expand on your,
Mr. Speaker, I would only wish to repeat what I said
well, do that.
in my
Repeat the,
presentation
Repeat.
during this session. I draw attention to 6L on page 11, and I'm amending so that the word voluntary be deleted because it gives the impression that this is optional. And I'm absolutely sure that compliance with the code of conduct, guidelines, and best practices is not an optional requirement.
I think that's an addition, that's voluntary.
Chair recognizes Michael.
Speaker, I just want to thank the
Look into it.
I want to thank the member opposite for his vigilance. We don't agree with him.
No.
If you read what it says, first of all, it's not speaking about imposing mandatory. It's not a mandatory provisions. It begins with the word encourage. So you're speaking about not about the imposition of anything. You are encouraging the development of the development. You're encouraging the update, and you're encouraging the use of voluntary codes of conduct. So it is not the act is not imposing a specific code of conduct, and because of what we're seeking to do here, this is something where there are going to be codes of conduct in relation to any number of different activities that we are involved with in the country. So it is not one code of conduct. It is not in relation to one particular type of activity, but it is the encouragement that the national authority, the competent national authority is doing. It is not the imposition of a particular code. So we don't agree with the suggested amendment, notwithstanding the vigilance of the member for Exuma.
I suppose the other side simply needs to put it to a vote. Speaker.
Being moved and seconded that clause 6, subsection L of the bill be amended as read, be agreed as amended. As many members in favor being seated, those opposing will rise. Those opposing will rise. We're on the amendment. So yes. Well, sorry, Exuma. Exuma's in Ragged Island. The proposed amendment is defeated. It's being moved and seconded. The chair again recognizes the member for the Exumas.
That clause 12C, 12.3C be deleted and replaced by 12.3D. Page 16.
16. Being moved and seconded that clause 12.3C be deleted and replaced by clause 3D. As many members are in favor of the proposed amendments as read remain seated. The chair recognizes the member for Southern Shores. No problem, Southern Shores. Make the non-conditional.
We accept the amendment. Question may be put.
As many members that are in favor of the amendment remain seated. Those opposing will rise. Clause 12(3) C is amended as proposed. Being moved and seconded that clause 2 through 45 of the bill be agreed as amended. As many members are in favor remain seated. Those opposing will rise.
It's agreed.
It's agreed.
Mr. Chair, I move that the schedule be agreed.
It's been moved and seconded that the schedule of the bill be agreed. Many members that are in favor remain seated. Those opposing will rise. The schedule of the bill is agreed.
Mr. Chair, I move that the bill in its entirety as amended be agreed.
It's been moved and seconded that the bill in its entirety as amended be agreed. As many members that are in favor remain seated. Those opposing will rise. The bill is agreed as amended in its entirety.
Mr. Chair, I want to thank you very much and now move that the Speaker take the chair.
Being moved and seconded that the Speaker now do take the chair. As many members that are in favor remain seated. Those opposing will rise. Speaker will now take the chair. Speaker, I beg leave to report that the committee has gone through the bill, making amendments thereto.
Honorable members, the Deputy Speaker and Chairman of Committee of the Whole House has reported that the Committee of the Whole House has gone through the bill, having made amendments thereto. Third reading and passing of bills.
Mr.
The
Speaker,
chair
I move-
recognizes the honorable member for Southern Shores.
I move that the Biological Resources and Traditional Knowledge Bill 2021 be read for a third time and passed.
Is there a second? Honorable members, it has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read for a third time. A bill for an act to provide for the protection and sustainable use of biological resources and traditional knowledge. As many members are in favor, will remain seated. Those who oppose will stand. Order that the bill be read for a third time.
A bill for an act to provide for the protection and sustainable use of biological resources and traditional knowledge.
Order that the bill do now pass and the title thereof be declared to be Biological Resources and Traditional Knowledge Act 2021. Further third reading and passing of bills.
And
Chair,
Mr. Speaker,
consideration of Senate amendments, resolutions, member statements. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Southern Shores.
Mr. Speaker, I stood earlier and I sent out all of those birthday greetings. I left one out because this one is special, Mr. Speaker. My mother, Lavinia Campbell, is a lover in every sense of the word. She has shown me love from the time I could remember. And I realized as I grew up, that is because her birthday is on Valentine's Day. She is a lover, and I just want to say, happy birthday, Mommy. And I pray that you will see many, many, many more birthdays.
Thank you. Thank you, honorable member. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Fox Hill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I would just like to send us some condolences to people in the Foxville constituency. And this condolences goes out to the entire Pratt family in the Congotown area on the passing of our cousin, John Pratt. And special condolences go out to his brother, Tyrone Tiny Pratt. May John's soul rest in peace. I also want to express condolences to the Ferguson family on the passing of Franklin Ferguson, to his brother Roscoe and the rest of the family. A memorial service for Franklin will be held at St. Paul's Baptist Church on Friday at 2 p.m. So our sincere condolences to that family. We also visited the family of the late Mrs. Ruth Colley in Garden View. Mrs. Colley has passed away and has gone on to her just reward. She was a lady who loved where she lives in Garden View and spent quite a lot of her time outdoors. She shall be missed. On the infrastructural area, I want to just let people know in the Canon John Q Estate area that we have begun cleaning the Silkaway Pond. You would have seen workmen in that area today. And so we hope to finish that work in short order. And finally, I'd like to say to the churches in Foxville, we had promised you some zebra crossing for churches who have parking lots across the road, and people have to cross the street to get to church. As you know, we've got some newly paved roads in Foxville, Bernard Road, where the Church of God is located. And we know in the past that, somebody's been knocked down there. So it has been agreed and it's finalized that the zebra crossing will be placed in that location, Church of God, Bernard Road. The second one by St. Paul's Baptist Church. They use the parking lot for overflow by the Foxville Clinic. And so a zebra crossing will be placed there. And the one that I think is the highest risk is Monterey Union Baptist Church on the top of the hill on Foxville Road. And sometimes the cars come up the hill with quite a bit of speed. And you have people who park on the western side of the street having to cross the street to get to church. So this is a promise made and a promise kept. So we will continue to move Foxville along and make sure that Foxville keeps up with the rest of the Bahamas, with the rest of New Providence. It is a special place, Mr. Speaker. And part of what we spoke about today in terms of traditional knowledge, know that a lot of traditional knowledge resides in Foxville. And I have asked before, and I will ask again, that Foxville be declared a national heritage treasure. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Member. The chair recognizes the Honorable Member for the Exumas and Ragged Island.
Speaker, I rise briefly just to offer my condolence to the Curling family in Ragged Island. They have lost the matriarch of their family, Mrs. Curling, and I send condolences to my friend Ricardo Carter Curling in Exuma, and of course Tycoon Curling, who lost their mother, and the entire community of Ragged Island. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Garden Hill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to extend condolences to, first of all, Neil McKenzie from downtown Barataria, one of the leaders in Barataria. When I was young, we used to go to Barataria in McKenzie Town, and Uncle Solomon was there to keep us, to take care of us. And today we mourn a passing. And so on behalf of every single person from Barataria, we extend condolences to the McKenzie Town and the McKenzie family in Barataria. In addition, Mr. Speaker, I join my colleague from Exuma to extend on my behalf and on behalf of the Member of Parliament, Southern Shores, condolences to our friend James Edgar Tycoon Curling, and indeed the entire Curling family. on the passing of their mother. And lots of individuals believe that we are close with a tycoon, but I always remind them that Elvis is the gem in the family, and he represents the curling well. So we extend our condolences to the entire family, and it would be remiss of me, Mr. Speaker, if I leave out Prophet. I would get at least 30 phone calls between now and 5 o'clock, reminding me that he is the heir. He is the one who knows every single thing about the family. And I'm informed, Mr. Speaker, that Mrs. Curling would be laid to rest next Friday. And we say to the family, blessings, Mama's in a better place.
Thank you. Chair recognizes the honorable member for Marco City.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Earlier, I extended condolences to 6 families in Marco City. I'd like to join the chorus of sending out condolences to the Curling family, my family, on my father's side from Ragged Island, and to say to Amanda, who's certainly one of my favorites of all of the family, y'all keep y'all male centric, calling the men in the family that we are praying for you, we are thinking about you during this difficult time, and to also say to the residents, particularly of Mayfield Park, we had the fill for the basketball court delivered last week. We are hoping that the construction company will be working this weekend. We will send out the blast so we can have your assistance in putting up. We're going to move on the basketball court and the mini tennis court, the community garden component. Hopefully this weekend, some of the building material will be there to move the community garden ahead. And then, of course, next week, we expect to be making some progress on the broader community garden in the area of Ponciana Adventures Way and, of course, Fort Bishop. And we'll also put a recreational park there. I want to say to Parks and Playground, we love collaborating with them. They're giving us advice, expertise, practical assistance in terms of putting up multiple parks in Marco City. And so I want to say special thanks to St. Barnabas. The appliance replacement program to assist persons who were victimized by Dorian will continue. I think last week we would have distributed somewhere in the vicinity of about 20 appliances to move that project along. As Course-Right and other service providers restock, we will resume with the list, the extensive list that we have from constituencies throughout Grand Bahama to get appliances to you. We just ask you to please keep the faith.
Thank you. Chair recognizes the honorable member for Tall Pines.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just wish to be brief. Quickly, Speaker, like my colleague from Southern Shores, I would like to wish a special person a really belated happy birthday. My daughter, like the member for Southern Shores, her birthday was on Valentine's Day. I guess a father can never ask for anything more precious on Valentine's Day, but I want to wish her belated birthday. We had a great time on her birthday. To thank my family, colleagues, and friends for their kind birthday wishes. My birthday was last week, Friday. And so it was a special weekend, Mr. Speaker. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, I wish to secondly, give my condolences to the Curling family also. I know a lot of the family from Exuma particularly. And I don't want to call names like my friends, but I just want to wish all of them, but particularly my friends who are still there in Exuma, my condolences on the passing of their mother and family member. Thirdly, Mr. Speaker, I wish to advise the members, my constituents in the Campbell Estates, Hunts, Close, and Ross Davis Estates area, which we've been touching bases with for the last few weeks, that we have received your community signs, Mr. Speaker. We had a project whereby we have taken down some wooden signs that was put up 2 days before our last elections, I believe. We've replaced them with proper cement signage, Mr. Speaker, and we intend to formally erect those in the coming week, along with the Fire Trail Road Crime Watch Association. So this is a project that we've been discussing with them and making them a part of. Thirdly, Mr. Speaker, I also wish to advise my constituents in the Stapleton Gardens area, the Christie Gardens area. I was pleased to meet with the Community Association, the Crime Watch Association last week, to let them know that our discussions with respect to the Christie Park, those plans are in gear. We will have persons there tomorrow starting to do work on the community park there as promised, and we look forward to working with them. Lastly, Mr. Speaker, my residents in the Rocky Pine Road area, we have completed their request of cleaning up the area, and we look forward to continuing those projects in the immediate area in the coming days. Southern Shores, we got your side too. We like to work with you, Southern Shores. We are still a team. And so, Mr. Speaker, I again wish to thank my colleagues for their birthday wishes, and I thank the people of Tall Pines for their continued confidence in my leadership as their member of parliament. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I think my colleagues in here might want to join me in this, and so I left it for a time such as this. I would like to extend condolences to our clerk, Ms. Asheran Lightburn, on the passing of her grandmother, Ms. Bertha Rose Davis, who passed away on Friday. I know she's been performing her duties with the stoicism and the professionalism that is distinctly part of her family and part of Foxville. So to Ms. Asheran Lightburn and all the Rose family, have our sincere condolences.
Thank you. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Golden Isle.
Yes, sir. Just want to join in the chorus, Mr. Speaker, and extend condolences to Mr. Vincent Wallace. He laid his mother to rest last Friday. To him and his family, sincere condolences. She's in the Lazaretto Road area. Also in the Lazaretto Road area, at Tillen Albury, Sister Raquel Albury, the rest of the family, they lost their sister, and they'll be laying her to rest early next month. And Mr. Speaker, I must add to this, since Foxville started this, talking about Foxville Village and what they offer historically, I should just like to remind the House that the oldest of the villages is still Adelaide Village, where the Africans, my ancestors, our ancestors, they never became slaves. They were captured on slave ships and set free, and that was the earliest area that was established. And so, having said that, Adelaide have the best of wetlands on the Providence, also for bird watching, and also for nature trails, and all of the bushes that the member for Marco City referred to for men and women. You'll find them in Adelaide, and some other kinds of bushes. You'll find them in Adelaide also. So whatever courtesies are accorded to Fox Hill, Mr. Speaker, please, Adelaide should be first on that list. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, honorable member. There being no further member statements, I would like to take this opportunity to speak directly to the citizens and residents of the Nassau Village constituency. This is your humble servant,
Yes, sir.
an independent
Yes, sir.
member of parliament, D. Halson Moultrie. I want to thank, first of all, the Free National Movement Association executive who have worked with me over the past 4 years, and all other members who have been working with me and continue to offer their support on the decision that I've taken to become an independent member of parliament. I can assure you that my purpose, should my name appear on the ballot again for the Nassau Village constituency, it would not be to split the F&M votes or to split the PLP votes. My purpose would be to gain all of the votes. And so, for the people of Seabreeze, Estates, Linden Finling Estates, Hope Gardens, Gleniston Gardens, Mount Tabor Estates, Malcolm Allotment, Red Lion Acres, Soldier Road, Freeman Smith Subdivision, and the Nassau Village Subdivision. I want to thank you for the many phone calls of encouragement. I also want to thank you, particularly for the ladies who worked so closely with me, who shared some tears over this circumstance. I want to thank you for what you've done, not only for me as the candidate and representative for Nassau Village, but also for the constituency and the communities that make up the Nassau Village constituency. You've called and asked for a meeting to make a determination on the way forward. That meeting will be held tomorrow evening at 6 p.m. And so the decision on the way forward would be made at that time. I welcome representatives from each one of the 10 districts, but we are restricted by physical distancing and the COVID-19 protocols. So we are accepting at least 2 persons from each of the districts, and we will determine our way forward. Only thing I can say to you right now is I still feel like Cupid with respect to Nassau Village constituency. Appointment of select committees. Instructions to select committees. Discharge of select committees. Notices for future meetings. Chair recognizes the honorable member for the Exumas and Ragged Island.
Speaker, I renew all notices on behalf of the opposition.
Thank you, honorable member. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Southern Shores.
Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to renew all notices in the name of the government and give notice that I move to adjourn to Wednesday, February 24th at 10 a.m. 2021.
Is there a second? Honorable members, it has been moved and seconded that the House adjourns to 10 a.m. Wednesday, the 24th of February, 2021. As many members that are in favor will remain seated. Those who oppose will stand. Final adjournment.
Final adjournment, Mr. Speaker. I move that the business of this House do adjourn until Wednesday, 24th February, 2021 at 10 a.m.
Honorable members, it has been moved and seconded that the House adjourns to Wednesday at 10 a.m., the 24th of February, 2021. As many members that are in favor will remain seated. Those who oppose will stand. The House stands adjourned to 10 a.m. Wednesday, the 24th of February, 2021.